Because the honest truth is that it's really not that hard to write this super long, complex, shreddy song with no structure or hooks. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we are here to talk about prog, or progressive music. And when I said the word prog, what came to mind for you? Headless guitars, ponytails, socks with sandals? Or maybe dudes making super awkward, inappropriate penis jokes in the comments of Misha's Instagram. Those are all perfectly good answers, but let me tell you what probably did not come to mind: great songs. The problem with prog is, in a word, riff salad, which I guess is actually two words, but you get my point. It's a genre that's fixated on technique, gear, time signatures, and other technical stuff to the point where they just kind of forget to write songs. So am I saying that prog nerds who may or may not have sexual thoughts about their guitars are slowly killing rock? No, not exactly, but also yes, I kinda am. And I will explain exactly why in this video. But first, join my new Discord. There's a link to that in the description. And also, I wanna thank Cove for sponsoring this video. This is the Cove 179S split speaker, which is perfect for listening to all the songs I mentioned in this video. Because unlike most portable speakers, it actually has a subwoofer. And I was honestly blown away with how good this thing sounds. I'm not just saying that. It legitimately sounds great. It connects via Bluetooth 4.2, so it's easy to pair with your phone or tablet or whatever other device. I set it up with my laptop in literally like 15 seconds, super easy. And it works up to 32 feet away from your device. And great battery life, it operates up to 7 hours on a single charge. And I really like the design. It's very like sleek and minimal. You can leave it like this, or you can split it up like this if you want like a wider stereo image. Sounds even better that way. And it's also IPX7 water resistant. So if you want to jump in the bubble bath and listen to the new Jairus Johnson song or whatever, you're good to go. And it has a built-in microphone in case you want to record yourself singing along, or I don't know, if you want to take a work call in the bathtub, you can do it. So if you want to check it out, you can get 65% off the Cove 179S split speaker at the link in the description. Just use the coupon code ROCK. First of all, for anybody who's not familiar, let me just talk about what I mean by progressive music. Just to be clear, this has nothing to do with progressive politics. I'm not talking about using AOC tweets as lyrics. What I'm talking about here is progressive rock or metal, aka prog, which refers to stuff that sounds like this, or this. That would be artists like King Crimson, Rush, or Frank Zappa back in the day, or more recently, bands like Dream Theater, Tool, Animals as Leaders, and Polyphia. But let's get specific about exactly what prog means. I think I will use the definition from progarchives.com. Progressive rock bands pushed rock's technical and compositional boundaries by going beyond the standard rock or popular verse-chorus based song structures. Additionally, the arrangements often incorporated elements drawn from classical, jazz, and world music. Instrumentals were common, while songs with lyrics were sometimes conceptual, abstract, or based in fantasy. Which I think in the best case scenario means bands like Issues or Polyphia, who are pushing the creative boundaries of the genre. For example, like when Issues put a gospel choir in a metalcore song. Well, I need you now to hold my head. But more often than not, what prog means is dudes who have a $5,000 guitar rig but no frame for their bed, jacking off with their guitars, trying to be technical for the sake of being technical, and churning out uninspired riff salad that honestly nobody but other guitar nerds cares about.
There was no song in your song. It's kind of just a collection of random shit. So put a little bit more effort in next time.
Kind of reminds me when I was in design school and there was this one kid who could draw better than all of us, like by a mile. Every time I would look over his shoulder at his sketchbook, he was drawing World of Warcraft characters. Incredibly detailed, beautifully rendered ones, but still it was orcs and trolls. He had all this technical ability, but so little creativity or vision. And unfortunately, as the influence of progressive music grows, especially like in metalcore, I would say, I see that same issue spreading through rock and metal in general. The same fixation on riffs, tone, and gear and technique over actual songs.
I'm going to show you my gent patch for Pod Farm.
And before we go on, I want to be super clear, I personally like a lot of this stuff. I was super into turbo nerd stuff like Return to Forever and Spastic Inc. back in the day. Sometimes I'll still put on a Bobby Jarzambek video while I'm eating breakfast or whatever. And I'm good friends with a lot of these artists and their producers, so I do get it, I do respect it, and it definitely has its place in the larger world of rock and metal. So don't take this as me talking shit. Think of it more like your older brother taking you aside, giving you a little bit of tough love that prog fans need to hear. And so with that said, I want to point out a few specific blind spots that I think come from this progressive mindset. Number one, to borrow a phrase from my friend Trey at Gear Gods, riffs are not a song. If you listen to a lot of prog fans talk about music, especially progressive metal people, it's always about riffs, as though this is like the atomic unit of a song. And the way that you write a song is by stringing together a bunch of cool riffs and then giving it to the rest of the band so the drummer can do whatever the drummer does and the singer can sing some stuff on top of it or whatever. Which is really just not the way that 99% of the world thinks about songs. To the vast, vast majority of people, a song is defined primarily by two things, the vocal melody and the lyrics, especially in the chorus. Like if you ask anybody, hey, do you know that song Party in the USA? They're not gonna tell you whatever the guitar part was in that song. They're gonna say, oh yeah, the one that goes. And the reason for this, I think, is pretty obvious. It's because a huge part of the prog scene is made up of guitarists. And you know, guitarists, in their mind, guitar is the center of the entire universe. Everything else exists just to elevate and showcase the guitarist. They're almost like pathologically incapable of writing a song where the guitars aren't the focal point of everything. And so you can see the problem here. A big chunk of the genre has turned into guitarists writing songs to just impress other guitarists that nobody else is interested in because there's no actual songs, just riffs. I mean, compare metalcore of like, say, 2004 or 5, like the Kill Switch era, which had some very good players, but was definitely about the songs. To this new stuff, there's just a bunch of generic dudes playing Architect songs in a colored room. And I do kind of blame this on the influence of prog because this was not the case in the 80s, 90s, or even the 2000s when guitar music was a lot more popular. Like take Van Halen for an example. Obviously a very heavily guitar-driven band, arguably like the greatest guitar hero of all time, but they never ever lost sight of the song. I mean, everybody knows the chorus to Jump. And you might say, well, I don't care, music doesn't need to be popular to be good. And you're right, that is true. But think about the kind of second order effects here. The fact that Van Halen was such a huge band and had that kind of mainstream success is what made Eddie Van Halen such a transformational figure and enabled him to do so much for guitar and guitar music in general. How many people got into guitar because of him? And would they have ever discovered him if he took the easy way out of just writing nerdy fusion songs for other guitarists? Or to use a more modern example, Periphery. They're easily the most popular band in that like modern progressive metal scene. And they're also the one that has the most like conventional song structures and sometimes almost pop-like choruses. This is not a coincidence. And again, think about how much they have done for the prog metal scene and guitar in general. And again, just like Van Halen, it's because of the songwriting, because they have better songwriting than 90% of the bands in their genre that just crank out that uninspired riff salad for other guitarists. So if you care about the future of guitar music and rock in general, the best thing that you can do is actually to think less about guitar and more about songs. Or next time you look out into the crowd of a rock show, it's gonna be a bunch of dudes with beards standing there like this, trying to figure out what string gauge the guitarist is using, and that is not a good thing for the long-term health of the genre. And number two, nobody gives a shit about how fast you can play. I also blame prog to some extent for a lot of modern rock's fixation on technique. I feel like they've kind of lost the plot and they place way too much emphasis on being good at your instrument. Like when rock fans talk about pop, they're oftentimes dismissive, like, oh, well, anybody can play that stuff. Which first of all, isn't true. The people who play in pop bands are some of the best musicians in the world who will play rings around almost anybody in metal, but that's another conversation. Or if they're talking about rap, they'll oftentimes say anybody could do that. It doesn't take any effort to put together a beat compared to a song with real instruments. And there's a couple reasons why that is honestly just kind of a dumb way to look at music. For one, why should it matter how hard it is to play a given piece of music? That has literally zero bearing on whether it's enjoyable to listen to a song or not. I mean, any 14-year-old can play Green Day songs, right? But who cares? They're great songs. And on the other hand, there's zillions of generic bland prog bands of like Berkeley dropouts whose stuff is incredibly intricate and hard to play, but nobody gives a shit because their songs are terrible. I'm sure there's some people already typing out angry comments here, but just bear with me because I think really this is a question of theory of value. In other words, what defines quote-unquote good music? In the prog view, which you could call the labor theory of musical value, the worth of music is largely defined by how much work went into creating it. Like, picture this. You spent decades practicing your instrument, honing your ability until your shred skills are over 9,000. Then you spent years writing your elaborate masterpiece concept album, and then spent months in the studio painstakingly recording it, redoing every take until it's absolutely perfect. There's some of you probably nodding right now, like, yeah, that's right, that is how you do it, that's how you make great music. On the other hand, you could look at it from another perspective, which I think makes a little bit more sense. In this other view, the only thing that matters is it a good song? And if it is, then it doesn't matter whether it took you 10 years, 10 hours, or 10 minutes to write it. It's interesting how people think about the value of music so differently than they would anything else. For example, if it took somebody 10 hours to make a sandwich, would that make it a better sandwich? Would you pay more for that sandwich? No, of course you wouldn't, because you don't care how long it took, you only care if it tastes good, right? So why should we think about music any differently?
Why you booing me? I'm right.
I actually think that this view of music, this labor theory of value, actually kind of devalues musicians because it basically defines a musician as an instrument operator. Like they're assembly line workers getting paid by the hour or based on how many widgets they're able to put together, as opposed to professionals like lawyers and investment bankers who are paid for the results of their work. They get paid to make the deal happen, and nobody cares whether it took them 50 hours or 20 hours. And wouldn't you say that it's better for musicians to be seen as professionals like lawyers or bankers rather than assembly line workers? Like imagine you hired a wedding band and then when it came time to pay them afterwards, you're like, I don't know, the second and third songs that you picked, they weren't that hard to play. I'm only gonna pay you half. And again, I place a lot of the blame for that on prog because one of the core values of the genre is making music that's technically difficult and complex. They see inherent value in both of those things. And trust me, I get the appeal of that. When I was 22 and I listened to a ton of Lightning Bolt, Cecil Taylor, and Spastic Inc., and all I wanted to hear was like the weirdest, most off-the-wall shit with the craziest shredding, it was cool, it was fun, and I do still like all that stuff. So I get the appeal, but I also understand it for what it is, musical masturbation. All this fixation on production and technique kind of misses the point. Mastering your instrument is just a means to an end. It's just something that enables you to make great music. It's not a goal in and of itself. And this is a problem. This is part of what's made the whole genre devolve into like guitarists trying to impress each other with how complex and difficult the material is and how sick their tone is, to the point where sometimes I feel like songwriting is almost an afterthought. Like, did anybody involved with this song really think that this was a great vocal hook? I don't mean to be harsh here. I'm legitimately asking the question. If they did, and this is what they came up with, then that's totally cool. I respect it, but I kind of doubt that they did. Because I talk to people in bands all the time, and they talk about guitar tone and drum samples 100 times more than they talk about vocal melodies or writing catchy choruses. And to be just totally blunt and honest, I think that this mindset of placing value on complexity in art is kind of immature. And I know because I did it too. I think everybody does. It's kind of a natural part of being an artist, I think, is that phase where you really fixate on technique and complexity. But you gotta grow out of that. And I'm not sure that rock has. If anything, they're just going deeper down that rabbit hole. Like when I was a graphic designer at the beginning of my career, I over-designed everything. You could give me the simplest brief in the world and I would always try to cram as many fonts in there as I could and make everything as like detailed and glitchy as I could, use every effect in the book, because I thought that made me a better designer to do more. And my art directors would kind of come over here with this pained look on their face like, there's a lot going on here. Maybe we could simplify it a bit. And I would always get so mad, like, no, you can't simplify it. Are you crazy? You're gonna ruin it. But guess what? They were right. And as I got better and matured as a designer, I learned to appreciate restraint. And I came to understand that actually it's kind of a cop-out. It's very easy to take this approach of just throwing everything that you possibly can into a piece of art and hoping that some parts of it come out cool, because really that's just like spray and pray. That's throwing shit at a wall and hoping some of it sticks. But what's really, really hard is being deliberate. Having a vision of where you want to go, a concept, and then deliberately executing on that, achieving that vision by using only what you need and nothing more. There's a Hemingway quote about this that I really like. Write the story, take out the good lines, and see if it still works. Or to put it in musical terms, write the song, take out the indulgent solos, overplaying, and effects, and see if it still works. That's why a song like Royals by Lorde is way more impressive to me than anything Dream Theater has ever done.
And we'll never be royals. It's running our blood.
Sure, the Dream Theater stuff is very, very hard to play. I'm sure those mixes are super complex, with tons of subtle effects and layers and all that stuff. But I would argue that it's way harder to write a song like Royals, and in some ways it might actually be harder to perform it, because there's nothing to hide behind in that arrangement. Just the vocals and some very minimal drums.
We count our dollars on the train to the party.
The tiniest little flaw is gonna stand out there, unlike these like majestic arrangements with 9 million layers where any imperfection is probably gonna be covered up by the fact that there's just a ton of shit going on at any moment in time. And honestly, I think a lot of these bands have kind of lost the plot of progressive music. I mean, take something like Chick Corea Electric Band. RIP to the legend Chick, by the way. You can say what you want. Obviously, this stuff is a little bit corny in hindsight. After all, it is like 30 years old now. But they were exploring uncharted territory. They were trying something new, pushing the boundaries. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But they were truly being progressive in the sense of pushing the limits. Whereas now I feel like progressive is really just another label for a sound. They've lost that progressive mindset. I feel like what most people now call progressive isn't actually progressive at all. It's really just imitating what the actual innovators were doing 20, 30, or 40 years ago. It's kind of ironic, right? I mean, I think copying Dream Theater is actually the exact opposite of being progressive. So what am I saying? Am I saying that everyone should dumb their music down and play simplistic crap to appeal to the masses? Absolutely not. What I'm saying is challenge yourself to do both. To push the boundaries creatively and technically, and write catchy, hooky songs that appeal to people who aren't dudes with a guitar fetish. And don't look at that as a compromise or dumbing down your music or anything like that, because it's actually the exact opposite. It's actually an even more advanced creative challenge because you've added another set of constraints. And as much as a lot of creatives don't like to admit it, constraints actually help creativity. If you truly want to challenge yourself, that's how you do it. To solve for two things at once, to write something that's progressive but also catchy and accessible. Because the honest truth is that it's really not that hard to write this super long, complex, shreddy song with no structure or hooks. It might be hard to play it, but stringing together a bunch of fancy riffs is not that hard. And the cold, hard truth that I know a lot of you are not gonna like to hear is that being a good guitarist does not make you a good musician. It just makes you a good guitarist. You're only a good musician if you make good music. Being a highly skilled guitar operator is an entirely different thing. So is it cool to experiment and do wild, off-the-wall, new shit? Absolutely. But stopping there is a cop-out. A truly great musician like Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix does both. The bottom line is this. Progressive music is cool and it certainly added a lot of fun, interesting stuff to the palette of what rock can be, but shredding and getting really good at your instrument is not the end-all be-all. We can't just sit back and let rock turn into a circle jerk of guitarists trying to impress each other. So please, if you care about the future of rock, just say no to Riff Salad.
There was no song in your song.
All right, my friends, that does it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you made it this far into the video, you are officially invited to join my Discord. We're up to almost 2,000 people as of now. So check that out at the link in the description. And as always, I want to thank everyone who supports us on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get every podcast a week early. There's a private patron-only Discord that I'm in all the time. I do Q&As, do some giveaways, and it is because of your support that we're able to do the podcast in the first place. That's how I pay our producer and editor who makes the whole thing happen. So thank you very much to all the patrons. If you are interested in supporting the show, you can do that at the link in the description. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.